Hello, Gabriel here. I've been surprised recently at the amount of people continuing to subscribe to my channel. No doubt from the views that I'm on various Dirt Rally videos that just sort of accumulate more views because they have a lot of views. So, you know, they get views because they get more views because they had views. The views make views, and likes make more views, even if it's like 2 of them. So I thought I'd release another tutorial because that clearly means that people are still playing Dirt Rally, and I started playing Dirt Rally again a bit recently as my memory becomes more hazy of the stages. Replayability is increased, particularly on stages like the ones on Monty here, where it's clear to me that I cannot go through the stages on memory alone. For example, there's a bloody blind crest into a hairpin on the ice, and it gets me every damn time. It's so annoying. So I thought I'd do a quick tutorial based on what I've learnt playing Dirt 4, actually. It seems to me that for some reason the setups kind of teach you more doing that game. I can't quite explain it. I'd have to have a really good memory to remember what the hell I'm talking about. But the point is that I've learnt a few things which, when applied to Dirt Rally, what I learnt, on the setups on Dirt 4, and I bring them over to Dirt Rally, I do in fact, even with such a sort of a gap in practice, while I've been playing other games like Holdfast, for example, increased my stage times by, like 2 seconds per. Seriously, up to 2 seconds per split. Now, I'm not good enough to hold that advantage throughout the stage, but up to 2 seconds per split is huge for just a simple setup change. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I thought in particular the thing I'd look at today was everything. I've chosen the Volkswagen Polo just because it has a lot of things. The only thing we're kind of missing to talk about is the center diff, because obviously this doesn't have one. So I thought I'd go over some things that will apply to every car, pretty much. So probably obviously the center diff. I'll just say now, basically, if you're driving in a place like Germany and there's a lot of straight lines, then it's good to have it a bit more towards the middle. If you're at a place with a lot of corners, even Finland, you want it quite far left. Like, cornering, grip is just everything in this game. I'd say that, there's probably, for speed, the things that are going to make you so fast are tuned in gear ratios and tuned in diff settings. And appropriate amounts of camber, which, as you can see here, I've aired on the just donk a load of camber on there, basically, because it just seems to be a net gain, basically. Like, you just don't seem to lose out for having that. I might just do something here, actually. Just do that. And we'll talk about why I did that earlier in a moment. Right, okay, so brake bias as ever towards the front. Brake strength, you kind of want your brake strength and your pedal sensitivity, or if you're using a controller, your finger sensitivity, to kind of have this interplay where the brake sensitivity doesn't activate so much of the brake that you lock up, but then also, that kind of means, why have, this amount of brake strength if you're just inevitably going to lock up? So I want you to just aim for a point where you can pretty much slam the brakes on, like, fully, like literally just full, you know, fully depressed. And just at the point where if you had it one tick more, like that, it would lock up, and then one tick less, and they won't lock up. This just means that you can, you know, you can just slam the brake as hard as you like, and unless you're on like the ice or something like that, you know, I mean, it's not perfect, but unless you're on the ice or on a bit of, you know, slightly less grip, you know, you can pump the brakes as much as you can slam the brake on as much as you like, and you're never going to lock up. That to me just makes the most sense. Now, if there's a caveat here, which is like if you were to use like more progressive braking, so you know, like the slower you're traveling, you know, the more brake strength you could employ because it's fighting like less momentum. But you know, we're not pro drivers, so for me, avoiding locking up just seems to make the most sense for, you know, probably 80% of people that play this game, or even 95% that play this game. I mean, you know, the top drivers in this game really make up, you know, like less than 5%. You know, it's really, so like, no offense to my viewership, but you know, I'm trying to make this like easy for you so you can get competitive times. And hey, look, I'm using it. You know, I'm taking on this philosophy of towards brakes, and it's working fine for me. You know, I'm getting top 50 times, you know, easily just by basically completing the stage without a mistake. Okay, so that's my thoughts on brakes. Front diff. I don't know why it looks like that. It shouldn't look like that. So basically, this is when you are driving lock is basically when, you know, it comes into play. You know, what it says down the bottom left there comes into play when you're on the throttle. Braking lock comes into play when you're on the brakes. LSD preload basically comes into play when you're sort of off the brakes, basically. So what you'll find is you want good, you know, turning and grip response on your front tyres. Basically, you want them to be kind of grippy to pull the car around, which means, you know, less percentage basically means more cornering grip, essentially. Braking lock basically means that the more percentage you have it, the more it will sort of hold you in a straight line when you're braking. The same can be said for LSD preload, except it converts a bit more into like cornering grip, because this just generally is in play when you're off the throttle. So basically what this means is you use these two to kind of, as a kind of you know, how much do I want the car to be able to rotate while I'm braking? Yeah. And this one, how much do I want the car to be able to rotate, and how grippy do I want it to be when I'm off the throttle completely? So that's kind of the best way to think about it. It's worth mentioning that on the front tires, that if you did it like this, you're gonna have it's gonna feel very, very difficult to turn the car with the weight loaded on the front tires, as opposed to if you had it like this. So I tend to put it down. I've not tried it like that. I'd be interested to try it like that. It might, you know, you might get a lot of turn in response there, but then equally you might kind of get this weird kind of no traction in the, if you know, in the mid corner, particularly in something like a front wheel drive car. So I tend to go around here. The more I think about it, the more I might put it really low. Braking lock, obviously you do most of the braking on your front tires because the weight loads up on the front. So you want there to be good traction there. But it's also nice to kind of actually be able to kind of turn the car while you're braking. So I have it quite high, personally. Rear diff. So the rear of the car takes a lot of load when you're cornering. And I find it nice to have a lot of power going through the rear wheels when we're turning, when we're accelerating around a corner, because then it really pushes the car. If you've got the grip, it kind of really forces the car around, especially with a large amount of negative camber. If you find that you're just kind of feeling quite loose in the rear, then you might put it down a bit. For me, that it seems to work best around there, though, in terms of speed, because it just really forces the car around. I mean, I'm aware that, in dirt rally, I can't, and on a loose surface. Oh, this should point out that this is what I'm saying is kind of specific to tarmac, but I'm trying to speak in kind of general terms, so kind of figure that out for yourself. Anyway, driving lock feels pretty good on the rear, like around down here. It really does. Like on a loose surface, you might just find it better to have it really quite low, but when there's a lot of grip, I find, particularly for the rear, I find it quite nice to have it quite high to really sort of force you around the corner. So I have the quite low braking lock, so I can actually, on the rear, so I can actually kind of rotate the car while I'm braking just a little bit, and so it kind of doesn't, it just doesn't kind of hold the car too straight, so you kind of, like it doesn't completely resist turning. And then I give it quite a lot of LSD preload, so we've got a nice lot of grip kind of around the corner. And to hold it in a, this also having it quite high will kind of resist let off oversteer. So like when I let off the gas, it doesn't just go into an oversteer state like immediately, because I get more sort of grip when I'm off it with this nice high LSD preload. Gears, as I said before about gears, in the modern cars and most cars, I've found the sweet spot for a nice long first gear to be around the 3 mark. And then I've really tightened, as you can see, I've really sort of given an even spread. Now, for me, that kind of makes a lot of sense, because it means you kind of get a lot of it kind of feels like torque. I mean, I'm not a mechanic. I might be wrong about that, but I'd say it feels like it gives you like a lot of sort of pushing power round corners if you have quite a lot of you've got like a nice even spread of gear ratios. Now, at this point, as my sort of knowledge comes under serious like attack from mechanics and engineers or whatever, or even drivers, please leave comments below if my rationale is just bonkers. If, for example, one might argue that it's just a net gain to have them longer for whatever reason, but for me, that I found stage times just go up. Kind of when I've had these tighter final drive and 5th and 6th gear, I found to be a particular sort of, on places like Germany, it's great to put this, really crank it up, and really crank these up, that sort of thing. Damn, I've just completely destroyed my setup there. So yeah, that's how I found it best to work for me in like 90% of cars. Kind of nice even spread, so you don't get these weird long 4th gears or something that just mean you never get into 5th gear on a straight. And then, subsequently you have like a tiny 5th gear, and then there's obscenely long 6th gear. It just seems very weird to me to have it any other way but that. So, on the front, basically, if you've got a ride height on the rear that's higher than the front, what that means is that pitches the car. Does it pitch? Would be pitch, wouldn't it? Yeah. Sort of, it loads up a bit of weight on the front of the car, which means, particularly on tarmac, you get more grip on the front for turning, which is just kind of a gain. really. But like the turn in, you'll just turn in better, and you'll brake a lot. Like you'll brake a lot stronger. Spring rate, well, we don't want the car rolling around. Firm grips will improve body stability, but bump absorption is reduced. Well, on tarmac, there's like no bumps, so that's kind of a, you can figure that one out for yourself. Anti-roll bar. So on tarmac, we're basically trying to replicate a Formula One car, aren't we? Basically, I mean that would be the ultimate Super Saiyan kind of car for tarmac. So, you might. I used to have it like that. I found though that you can actually kind of be more agile with the car and actually use the brakes to kind of put the weight around the road better, if that makes sense. Basically on tarmac, I try it like this setting, see how you go with that, then try it on that setting, and try and use the brakes as a sort of way of throwing the car a little bit. You'll find it also, when you handbrake, you'll find it much easier to slide if you've got this tiny bit of roll in the car. Camber angle, I just don't see any reason for not having this really loads. I mean, if someone wants to correct me on that, go for it. Yeah, I don't have much to say about that, to be honest. It just seems to be that on Dirt Rally anyway, the more you have, the more you can get away with, the more cornering grip you have, and 90% of the time on Dirt Rally stages you're going around a corner, so it just seems to be a net gain. Toe angle, I am just not learned enough to find like a good use for this. So again, fill in the comments if you found a way to actually make, or you can understand exactly what this does, because I've tried to learn about it, and I've had some conversations with people, but I've just not been convinced of a sort of a practical use or a way of actually making things faster on Dirt Rally, so I leave it at 0. Ride height, this is the part, on the rear, this is where we're loading up the front, and it's basically a mirror. As you can see, we're allowed more camber on the rear, which is really nice, because when you're going around a corner, if you're on the throttle, the weight's going to be on the rear of the car, and you're going to, as the diff is sort of, as I've got more sort of power going through the rear of the car when I'm turning, when I'm on the throttle, you throw that into, let's say you're turning left, and you throw all that weight and power into the right rear tire, and you've got all this grip, and it's loaded up, and you're just unleashing the power of your little 1.6 turbo petrol engine onto that tire, and you're really going for it. Dampers, again, I throw my hands up and I say I don't understand them enough, but what I would say is I know that these dampers are a sort of, like if I did this, then I'm never going to get any sort of you're going to get kind of more grip, basically, because it's softer. You can kind of think of them like you would on this game, at least. I'm not saying this is the case, like in reality, I'm saying on the game. You can kind of think of them as like the anti-roll bar, because these damper settings are going to affect like the rollability of your car. So I have them quite stiff for tarmac, and quite soft for loose surfaces. But places like Finland, you need to use these dampers to resist. I believe I've got a tutorial about this. You need to use the dampers to kind of resist going over big jumps. So if your car's like bottoming out, for example, you might consider putting the dampers like much firmer. So I think on Finland I often roll with something like this or this. Yeah. Any questions? Any corrections? Now, please do not take what I've said as sort of some sort of law. That is, don't be like, oh well, then he obviously knows best. No, let this be a sort of conversation between my viewership and I, and who knows, maybe we can, we can all come together and make a whole bunch of faster drivers together. Thanks for your time, and keep trucking.